Welcome back to Beyond Campus, a podcast that delves into various topics pertaining to Israel, Zionism, and having a positive connection to Israel on campus and beyond. I'm your host, Destiny Albritton, with the Israel on Campus Coalition. Today, I'm discussing being Jewish on campus with our guests, Bridgette Meshkani and Daniel Conway, two exceptional student leaders from the University of California, Berkeley, in addition to being ICC Geller International Fellows. Thank you for joining us today. Enjoy the show. Hi, Daniel and Bridgette. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to, get into this conversation with you. I think so many people have questions for you two as UC Berkeley students. So I guess before we just jump into some of the big subjects I want to tackle today, can you both tell me a bit about, or can you tell our listeners and the people who are watching a bit about yourself and why did you choose UC Berkeley?
Sure. I'm happy to kick it off. Hi, everyone. I'm Daniel. I'm a sophomore at UC Berkeley. I'm studying environmental economics and policy in the College of Natural Resources. I chose Berkeley because they have a great environmental program. It's what I really wanted to go into, do something revolving the solutions to climate change and all that. Then I ended up getting super involved in the Jewish community, something I didn't really have in my youth. And then my expectations were do well in school, find cool opportunities. And I found a lot of these opportunities through the Jewish community, through advocating for Israel, etc. And I've honestly enjoyed my undergraduate experience, although all of this craziness, but it adds a little bit of spice to our everyday lives, I guess.
I like that, a little spice. Yeah. What about you, Bridgette?
First of all, Destiny, thank you for having us. Really appreciate you and we'd love to be here. But hi guys, my name is Bridgette. I'm a second year studying economics and I'm currently an ASUC senator at UC Berkeley. I chose Berkeley because of my aspirations to join the undergraduate business school and still working towards that goal. I knew that coming in that the Jewish community would be something completely different than I was used to. A little bit different from Daniel. I grew up with a very, very strong Jewish community that was inherently very supportive of Israel. So I knew coming here would be a challenge, but I was okay with that. And I was looking forward to seeing how I can grow and learn and help the Jewish community here.
So you both mentioned when you were discussing your involvement with the Jewish community and each of your Jewish identities, you both mentioned Israel. Can you unpack for me, because remember, I'm not Jewish, and maybe not all the listeners are Jewish. Can you explain for me like what that link is or what the connection is between your Jewish identity and being involved in the Jewish community, with how does that connect to Israel and how does that relate to your Jewish identity?
It's just been very important to me and I've been learning about it a lot since coming to school, especially the last year-ish, because once again, like I've really gotten involved in the Jewish community at Berkeley. Even though there's all this stuff happening, the Jewish community is really able to be strong and it's a very strong community. And I think a lot of the pushback we get forces us to be stronger. So I've been able to learn about Israel in a lot of different ways. And I'm trying to continue to learn and become a better advocate as I go throughout school.
A big part of that comes from my family leaving Iran and kind of figuring out where that place that's going to keep them safe will be. And for most of my family, that was Israel. So right after leaving Iran, around 79, a lot of my family fled to Israel and still lives there now. And so a big part of my family broke off there. And then eventually A lot of my family moved to the US. So it was definitely an initial safe haven for a big part of my family. It's a big reason why I believe that it's so important that Israel continues to be that safe haven.
Yeah. Something I don't think people beyond the Jewish community really understand is that Israel is the ultimate expression of Jewish self-determination and autonomy, like you're kind of touching on, Bridgette, that there's one country in the world, there's one country in the world that exists as a sort of insurance policy when things go, really poorly for the Jewish community in all different parts of the world. They can flee to safety in the Jewish state, in the Jewish homeland, right, in the land of Israel. And I just want to point out that, you two, of course, you don't speak for the entire, Jewish community in the whole entire world, but the American Jewish community, the American Jewish Committee, they conducted a survey last year that found 87% of American Jews, they viewed statements denying Israel's right to exist as anti-Semitic. And so what you two are both saying about your connection to your Jewish identity being related to Israel and the two things being linked together, that is a very representative view of the Jewish community, particularly here in the United States. And I also want to ask you two, last fall, UC Berkeley, the UC Berkeley Law School made news because they put forth an initiative that banned like Zionist speakers. And that was very alarming for many people who saw that. Even the law school's dean said it would exclude about 90% of Jewish individuals, including himself. I mean, what did you guys think when that happened? Did that impact you while you were on campus at all?
Initially, because it didn't seem like it was a problem in the undergrad and not really something that we could control ourselves. It was one of those things that as a Jewish community, I think we were very upset about. But as far as its impact, I don't think we were looking towards taking any action or doing any combating of any sort, just because I think initially the Jewish students in the law school had asked us not to. I think this was something that they wanted to fight themselves. So we kind of stood down and let them handle that. But after the Jewish Free Zones article came out, that was when our outside communities and people who cared about us really were adamant on us focusing on how we can not let that trickle down into our undergrad and do respond, but more in a preventative way.
You mentioned earlier, Daniel, that you found such a strong community and a strong advocacy in the Jewish community since you started college at UC Berkeley. This semester, very recently, there was an effort to pass an IHRA resolution. And for those of you who are not so familiar with what the IHRA is, that stands for International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. And it's an intergovernmental alliance of 32 member countries whose mission it is to combat anti-Semitism, to preserve Holocaust memory, and focus on Holocaust-related issues. So they came together and they developed a working definition of anti-Semitism that was authored by a team of experts. And, essentially they came together and asked themselves, how do we define anti-Semitism in a way that reflects the lived experiences of Jewish people with modern anti-Semitism. It's important to note that this definition, while it is used in different resolutions in different universities, in different contexts, it is not a legally binding definition. They authored it for it to be an educational tool. So it's really a framework for understanding the ways Jewish people experience anti-Semitism. And the definition itself doesn't say anything about Israel, but the authors, they wrote examples that they would extend, that they consider the definition could be applied to, or that by their definition they would consider anti-Semitic. And so some of those examples include delegitimizing Israel, or comparing Israel or Israelis to Nazis. And that's typically where the pushback on using that definition comes from. So with that context in mind, I know both of you, neither of you authored the resolution, but I know, Daniel, you spoke at the vote as a constituent of the legislative body that voted on this. And Bridgette, you are a member of that legislative body yourself. So I guess, I'll start with Bridgette. Can you tell me about why you supported this resolution and why you saw the need for that IHRA resolution?
Yeah, definitely. I think that this definition goes beyond just defining anti-Semitism as hatred towards Jews. And I think it really details the ways that it can manifest itself in ways that maybe people didn't initially think about. I read many examples from the EU about concrete examples in the past 6 or 7 years where the examples found in this definition have really manifested itself. And you would never think that something so small would be anti-Semitic, but inherently it is, and this definition proves that. Just to give an example, applying double standards to Israel than to that of any other country. So treating the actions, not holding the actions of Israel up to the same standard of any other country. And the way that this can manifest itself is when you're forcing people to denounce the actions of the Israeli government to be able to participate in a festival, when the festival had nothing to do with religion, had nothing to do with Israel, but the founders of the festival required that the man who wanted to perform denounce the actions of the state of Israel, which is something that no one else had to do with any other country. And I think that's where I have a problem. And I think that other people should have a problem too. And this definition details situations like that, where people are being forced to do things solely because of the fact that they're Jewish and are being excluded because of that. So I think that there is a need for it among this campus, because I don't want everyday Jewish students at this school to get conflated with actions of a certain government or a military defense force that they are not a part of. They're a Jewish student at this school studying at this university. How can we prevent these everyday inconveniences for these students and these everyday just pain with a definition that really outlines the more hidden forms of anti-Semitism that it has morphed into the past few years.
Yeah, I mean, and I think something that you're touching on, which is why like this definition is so important, is that people, again, people who aren't Jewish, they don't understand Jewish identity because it isn't their experience. They don't understand the experiences that students like you, like both of you and your peers, they don't know what you experience. And these experiences that you're discussing of Jewish students who have maybe never even been to Israel, being held accountable for the actions of the Israeli government or the Israeli army because they're Jewish and Israel is the Jewish state. And that is one of the examples that the authors of the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism give, that is, this is considered anti-Semitic, holding Jewish individuals accountable for the action, for like Israeli policy and the actions of the Israeli government. Daniel, you spoke at the vote. Why did you support this resolution, and why did you see the need for it?
I really supported this definition because, like you said earlier, it's a framework. It's an educational framework that is, the goal of it is to make sure people are aware of what is anti-Semitic. Like also you said, it's not like legislative, it's not legally binding, or like I guess it is because in the form of the bill of its implementation, but inherently it's not gonna do anything outright aside from let people know and be able to identify anti-Semitic incidents when they occur, and they do occur at Berkeley. There was like the week before someone graffitied on a wall of like an ASUC building on campus. Was it like Jew go away or something like that? It's like that happens. I have like friends I'm in API, the Jewish fraternity, like friends in my fraternity who like maybe also wear Magen David and have been called like slurs walking by. Or we did Sukkot last year. We're sitting there eating our dinner in the sukkah and people drive by and yelled stuff at us. It's like these things, I don't know what it is, if it's Berkeley, the school, or what it is, but people have a problem with Jews. And no matter what it is, the IRA just covers like every facet of anti-Semitism. Like it's important that those examples are used to relating to Israel. Like and especially, I mean, at Berkeley, you mention Israel and everything goes crazy, which is just like really not a good way to handle the situation. Like one, like the conflict is very convoluted. Yes, but like if we can't talk about it on a campus, how is like anything gonna happen? Like I think that was one of the things I've tried to focus on more recently, is that talking is one of the most important things you can do like regarding this conflict, and having these one-on-one conversations about, hey, what is this, like making your definitions, etc. But then going back to just IRA and anti-Semitism, defining that at its core and having something you can rely on is like essential to prevent like catastrophe. And I don't know a better way to put it. So it's really just seeing this happen in the ACC and seeing like a lot of my friends, a lot of people in my community go up there and speak about their personal experiences, whether they faced anti-Semitism, their friends were facing it, or they just are seeing it around, and then seeing kind of a blatant disregard for this definition that is widely accepted in many places all over the world, institutionally, etc. Why can't we just understand, and why can't the Jewish community establish their definition for anti-Semitism? Gave me a lot of weird feelings, and to a lot of people in the community, and especially just shows kind of how there are some clear issues within the ACC, and how like there needs to be maybe more due diligence, more directed education about this topic, maybe before something like this happens again, I'm not sure. I'm not that involved with like the ACC itself. I do a lot of other stuff within the community, but it's just, to me, shows a lack of education. And when we're trying to implement an educational tool to help this happen, it's really hard to see. So I'm just hoping that there's change in some regard, and that people start to make an effort to learn about what it's like to be a Jewish student on campus and how to prevent making us feel this unsafety, or this, feeling unsafe on campus, which happens frequently.
Yeah. So when you say, you talk about feeling unsafe on campus, and you also mentioned the experiences that you've had where the people have come by and said, called you and the other AEPI brothers like names. Would you say would you say that those are common experiences, or like the exception to your experience?
I mean, I wouldn't say common, but they've happened, which is like way more than enough. Like these things just simply shouldn't be happening. It's 2023. I mean, this happened in the fall. I know like things have happened. Things happen a couple times a semester like that, maybe. But I mean, then things go even crazier. Like I was tabling for Bears for Israel a couple weeks ago, and like our president, she was tabling, and someone came up to her and like said some awful things like about her and her family, which was just because she was Jewish. And it's like, whoa, like this is way too much. Like literally attacking someone and saying that you would feel more comfortable if they were dead is such an absurd.
Would sleep better at night knowing that her family is dead.
Which is like, whoa. Like that actually like gave me chills, and like it made me really take a step back and realize how problematic this can be, that there are people on this campus that just don't, like, I don't even know how you get that far, like it's terrifying. And when there are things like what happened to the ACC building, the graffiti, and really nothing happened. I think there maybe a statement was put out because there was a couple other instances of graffiti towards other groups too. But still, it's like, I don't know. It feels like there's not enough happening. And when we're a minority on campus, it like feels like we're not thought of enough.
So let me ask you, so I know that the student government meeting where this was discussed, where the IHRA resolution was discussed, that meeting lasted for hours and hours. And I know that the pushback on that resolution was pretty aggressive. Have there been other sort of solidarity resolutions discussed in student government at UC Berkeley that passed? Like, did they have any, and if the answer is yes, like, did they have the same aggressive opposition? Bridgette, do you know?
My understanding, I know that there's been recognition of groups on campus that maybe have not gotten certain attention from the university that they should have, or issues on campus that the university has failed to address, and those have passed unanimously and have had no amendments made to them. These are more specific to lack of support for these communities, or lack of understanding of their struggles as an Iranian community, for example. So resolutions like those tend to pass unanimously, and when they're not tied to a geopolitical issue, they pass unanimously. And so I don't really think there has been a different resolution that has been tied to a geopolitical issue. So there has not been an opportunity for us to see whether or not it receives pushback or not.
Yeah, something that I, noticed. I mean, I can't imagine how anyone could hear what, both of you have experienced either personally or what your families have survived and say that your community doesn't deserve protection. And so I'm just so sorry to hear that those things have happened to you guys and to people that at your school, and that you weren't, that your resolution didn't pass unanimously. I'm so sorry to to hear that, and the comment that was made to the student who was tabling. I just am I mean, there are no words for that. It's completely unacceptable. And it's baffling to me that that your community would be expected to experience such a high threshold of that pain that you talked about earlier, Bridgette, before, your student government acts to pass a resolution in solidarity with you the way they have unanimously for other communities. I'm so sorry to hear that. Can you, yeah. Most people, again, most people who are listening have never been in one of these student government meetings. They've never been in a vote, whether it was for, a BDS resolution or a resolution for the Jewish community, in support of the Jewish community, like you guys just went through. Can you describe for me what that room was like?
Yeah, definitely. At first, it was a smaller room, I want to say maybe with 100 people, and mostly was student government officials and the extension, so parts of their offices. But after realizing that there was over an hour line to get into this room, and that line would not move because we had already filled the capacity, they had soon realized that it would have made more sense to move the meeting to a room that can hold more students. So we were moved to Poly Pavilion, which is a room that can hold hundreds and hundreds of people. So once we packed up all of our stuff and moved, that's when the weird hostile environment started, where we had two big groups of people who were not in support of IRA on the sides and behind also. And then we have a big group of Jewish students and people who supported IRA in the middle of the room. And I'm not really sure how that configuration came about, but it was quite interesting and almost felt like they were being trapped, even though it was, for the most part, a very respectful, and I wouldn't say respectful, but peaceful arrangement where people, like audience members, were not attacking each other, but there were definitely flags and posters that were being put up every time a Jewish person or someone spoke in support of IRA. So it was just interesting to see how those flags went up, those posters went up immediately as someone would talk, and even go as further as to lift up posters when the Southeast Asian senator would speak and hold up a poster in her face that says Southeast Asians like do not support IRA, and Southeast Asians are in support of Palestine, just to kind of remind her and guide her to where her priorities and where her views should align. So I thought that was really interesting. configuration of people in the room, and it was definitely very hectic, and it almost turned into a debate, I would say, because I felt that we were in public comment about the consent calendar, and as soon as one community heard something that they didn't like, they would send another person from their community to go put their name into the pile and address everything that they didn't like to hear. And I think from then it wasn't more of a say all that you need to say. It was more of a back and forth debate. And that was a big part of the reason why I motioned to give everyone a final 10 minutes to put their names into the list, because I felt that we would have been sitting there all night long had we given people the chance to continue to rebuttal everything that they heard. So that was a big reason why I felt like I needed to cut it off, but at a time that gave people a few minutes to really make sure that if they wanted to speak, they could.
So I set myself personally, like, I'm gonna give my speech and then I'm gonna go home and go on Zoom, because I can't lose more sleep. Like, weeks are crazy here. So I was able to stay and watch the support, which was really nice, but the environment was crazy. Like, the student in support of I would come up, and then we'd snaps, like, whatever this, then a student in against Ira would come up, and there'd be like banging on like the floor and like loud cheering, all this. It was just really like, it was just a lot. Like, I wish it was more centered around a discussion of what IRA was and what its impact would be for Jewish students. Then I think the public comment, it's helpful to a certain extent, but a lot of people don't even know what IRA is when they're going up there and giving a public comment. They just hear like, oh, IRA is the thing that's going to make us unable to advocate our beliefs, which, like, I think if people did a little more due diligence and were able to, I don't know, like, really try to understand from another perspective what it means, that the conversations really shouldn't have even been there. Like, I think conversations were framed in the wrong place at times, and I wasn't there.
So it's interesting that what you're saying is, I asked you about like what the room was like, and you described at a student government meeting where a resolution that discussed anti-Semitism, which is experienced by the Jewish community, which is, hatred of the Jewish people. And that's the topic, that's the focus of that discussion. You had people coming waving Palestinian flags whenever someone spoke in opposition of it. And it's just, so I just want to know that, that decentering of the conversation that you're discussing, right? That it was, meant to be a conversation about the Jewish community and what the Jewish community needs in order to prevent and decrease discrimination against the Jewish community. And the conversation got decentered from that into this like political conversation, and this conversation about a conflict on the other side of the world that, again, you two, Daniel, I think you said you've only been to Israel twice in your life. You are not responsible for Israeli policy. You're not responsible for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and that's what the conversation turned into. Is that what you're saying?
It didn't necessarily get into anything deep regarding policy or anything like that, but it was just it felt like there was a clear disregard of the like main point of the bill, and it really just focused on that example of how like targeting Israel with Jewish people can be anti-Semitic, and then just took that as like, this is gonna make me so I can't do what I don't know what they want to do, which if you take it in regards to the bill, I don't think that's a good like if it's like we can't do this, but if it's defined as anti-Semitic, then that's interesting.
Right, right.
I'm not insinuating that they are necessarily that, but
How did each of you feel when you heard the results that the resolution did not pass? Bridgette, we can start with you.
Yeah, so I first want to say that I do think that some parts of policy trickled into this conversation. We heard ways on how you can support the BDS movement. What are the ways when you go shopping for items, how can you identify that what you're buying has been made in Israel, and how the IDF has impacted their family. And I think this really does trickle into policy in these conversations and in that room specifically. And after hearing 7 or 8 hours of public comment, for a lot of senators, they were just tired and ready to go home, and they were not willing to sit and have a conversation about the lived experiences that we just heard about. And that was sad to hear, because for them and for how much I care about Berkeley and our student community, I would have sat there all night and talked about another issue that was really impacting a big group of people at Berkeley. So it was just hard to see that they were not willing to sit down and have that needed discussion, or at least if they didn't want to have that discussion that night because of how tired they were, why couldn't we postpone this and continue having this conversation later on? Because there was so much more that could have been said as a legislative body, and public comment controlled that conversation to the point where there was no governmental debate, or at least recap of what we just heard, and we didn't really sort through those things. We didn't sort through what we just heard in our discussions, and we kind of just put everything to a vote, which really hurt. I know really hurt the Jewish community.
Yeah. Daniel, how did you feel when you heard about those results?
It didn't feel good, but I definitely expected it. Like, I think just understanding going into it, the climate, and then especially being there was like, okay, wow, this is way off the rails. That I was like, I can't imagine that this is gonna end up in the right place. Like, we'll have to like figure out a new strategy for next time. So obviously, I mean, this happened and it showed a lot of issues with a lot of parts of the process. And I think now it's just the responsibility for whoever wants to tackle it next, or keep fighting for Jewish students and trying to establish some sort of grounds for anti-Semitism prevention, that there are some more steps that need to be taken before it gets brought back to a group like that.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I just wanted to add something. I think that after this day, I don't know if you wanted to get there or not, but we really had further discussions about who are the communities that are really against IRA, and why, and what are the ways that we can still implement parts of IRA into the student government, into the conversations that we have, without unfortunately institutionalizing this definition. And I'm hoping, and what we've been working on is an anti-Semitism training that allows for conversations about how those examples may manifest itself in anti-Semitism, so that the governing body for years to come will know how those examples can manifest itself, so they themselves will be able to identify anti-Semitism and when a governing body is able to define it, then they will be more comfortable in combating it because they see it and understand it for what it is. So I'm really hoping that we can start those conversations and get this training, the training institutionalized, so we can have those tough conversations in a less hostile way.
So I have two final questions for each of you. How have you seen the Jewish community at UC Berkeley come together to support each other in that difficult time?
I think at least from the group of students that were there, like at the meeting, we all kind of were there, like very much feeling a form of pressure. And then even just like while we're there, it's just like clear that we were there together, and like the interactions in that room with all of us just felt like very genuine. And then coming out of it, we're having like our whatever follow-up meetings or debriefs with whoever was like very much like, wow, like that was intense and a lot. Like, how are you doing? Because it's like this happens, but then guess what? You have a midterm the next day, and papers do like there's a lot of stress happening, and then something like this, it's very personal, very unavoidable. It's difficult. So it's really been nice that, I mean, a bunch of parts of the community like are very, very tight and supportive. So it's been there's support like in every corner of the Jewish community. So it's really nice to have that at least.
Yeah, we're very lucky. I definitely see that I feel like we're more unified than ever, which is something that you wouldn't expect, but we are. And it honestly has given me the opportunity, after this day, it's given me the opportunity to really go back and talk to some Jewish students who maybe aren't in support of IRA, because there were some, especially at that meeting. So it's definitely has left room for discussion. But for the big majority of Jewish students who wholeheartedly supported IRA, we've really grown as a community. So I'm very happy about that.
That's wonderful to hear that, that unity and that people have come together to support one another. What advice would you give to a high school senior who's thinking about going to college and, thinking about what it will mean to be a Jewish student on campus? What advice do you have for that person?
I'll say just making sure that you're putting yourself out there in situations. I mean, for me, like to try new things to the point, and it's gonna feel, you'll find something that feels like home.
Bridgette?
My advice would be, if you don't know what you're doing, just dive right in. I definitely had a very good understanding of how to strengthen Jewish communities, but never in this way. And I think that being a part of these conversations and being so involved in standing up for what you believe in is so important, and really helps you improve yourself and become more open-minded and become more educated, and use that education and that knowledge as power to fuel those conversations that you have. And I really think what the Jewish community does well is we really focus on our education, because we understand that it is power. And I guess my advice would just be to, even though it may be hard, and even if you don't know a lot, these Jewish communities are here to teach you and allow you to get involved if you want to. So don't ever feel like you don't know enough, and don't ever feel like you can't get involved, because you definitely can. And if you believe in something, especially for this cause, then really, really do get involved, and don't be scared. It's okay to be scared, but like use that fear to empower you. So yeah.
Wow. Well said. You know, like you both kind of touched on this, but at times it might feel like so many people are against you, but there are so many more people that are for you. If you stand up and you do the right thing, we're all here. We have your back. Daniel, Bridgette, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you so much for your leadership on campus.
Thanks for having
Thank you so much, Destiny. I really appreciate you.
Yes.
I love you guys.
Love you.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to follow us on social media at IsraelCC and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.